So hello, today it's a little bit surprise for my listeners because this is the first podcast I'm doing in English language because my guest today does not speak Slovenian yet, and she is Natalie, currently living in Ljubljana. Natalie, welcome to my podcast, and I invite you to shortly introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hi, hello. Thanks for having me. And I really do hope that the Slovenian language situation will change for me later on, because I am a language nerd and I am learning it. But it's a difficult one. But I'll get there. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Natalie. It's pretty hard to introduce myself as of now because I used to do that in a very kind of formal professional way. Hi, I'm Natalie, a graphic designer and art director. Now I think I identify more with Ashtanga yoga topic. So I would introduce myself as an Ashtanga yoga practitioner and soon to be teacher, hopefully. That's what I am, and that's what I love doing, and that's where I kind of see my purpose. But professionally, I am a graphic designer. So that's how I used to earn my bread and butter in my entire conscious adult life. So that would be it.
Okay, perfect. And Ashtanga Yoga is actually the topic why we are meeting today. You chose quite a hard path. So can you tell us a little bit more why and when it came into your life?
It's actually a wonderful path. I think it's only hard when you started, and then it kind of makes the entire life easier. I mean, at least that's the way it worked for me. When did I start it? I think it was the year 2019 when I kind of switched to other yoga styles, to Ashtanga, because I was always interested in yoga and there was always kind of a supporting activity for me. One of those physical activities, along with the running and some other stuff that I did, that kind of helped me support my body. So I lived here and there, and there was a phase in my life when I moved to where I'm originally from. I'm originally from Moscow, Russia. So I lived there in 2019. That's where I resided. And I was going to Vinyasa flow classes with an amazing teacher called Miriam in one of the yoga studios there. And I was doing that kind of like very superficially a couple of times a week. And then she left. So she immigrated to another country. And I needed a replacement for my Vinyasa flow classes. So I really liked the studio where I was going. And I really liked the time I was practicing, which was the morning time. It was not very early morning, it was around 9, 10 in the morning. I kind of wanted to keep the location and the place and the time. So I was looking for a replacement. And that's actually a very funny story I wanted to share. Before my Vinyasa flow classes, there was an Ashtanga class, a traditional Ashtanga Mysore class that would usually take place in the same classroom, starting 6:30 until like 9:30. And people who would exit the room, they look pretty crazy to me. They look super sweaty, super tired. There were a lot of guys actually there. That was pretty surprising because, the majority of yoga practitioners that you see in like an average yoga studios are girls, and there were a lot of guys, and that was very surprising. And the first thing they would do is they would go into the corridor and they would spread the mat and they would start like cleaning it rapidly, like it's like super, super rapid. And I was like, okay, these are some weirdos. I'm gonna go and try this class because that's kind of in my nature a little bit. I like trying crazy things and I like trying things that look super weird to me. I just kind of want to crack the quest and understand what that's about. And so, yeah, I eventually came to Mysore class, and this is how my Ashtanga path started within Mysore class, traditional Mysore class in Moscow.
Okay. So you mentioned a lot of times Ashtanga, Ashtanga, Mysore. Maybe not all the listeners are familiar with this particular yoga style. So can we go into it a little bit? So what is Ashtanga? How is it practiced? Some of them might know there are some sequences, but let's just dive into a little bit of theory before we continue with the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ashtanga, the way I would describe Ashtanga, it's a very systematized way of teaching Hatha Yoga, because all the asanas that we do and all the styles essentially fall into the Hatha Yoga category. But Ashtanga is a system, is a method that's slightly more rigid than, say, a regular Hatha Yoga class you would find in a studio in your city. That involves very structured sequences of asanas, and a pretty kind of strict manner of, teaching and practicing also. And that's also, something that in Ashtanga community we call like a lifelong practice. So something that you keep evolving in, and something where you keep learning new things, new asanas, and kind of adapting the philosophy to your life. Speaking, about like kind of more down to earth rules, like I will call them rules, but at the end of the day, it's up for everyone to what extent they want to follow that kind of Ashtanga regimen. Let's call it traditional Ashtanga regimen. Well, that's something that an average traditional Ashtangi practices 5-6 days per week, with an exception of Sundays or Saturdays usually, and moon days also. So that's the full moon and the new moon. Yes. And for women, or for people who menstruate, that's also whatever days they're comfortable taking during their menstrual cycle also. But other than that, it's 5-6 days per week. That's like a golden standard. And that's also something that is supposed to be practiced early in the morning, because there is, well, I'm pretty sure they can be scientifically backed, but I'm not ready to do that now. That in the morning, the energy is completely different. And when you start the morning, your brains and your mind, they also function very differently from, say, evening. So it's a more comfortable time just for your body, in your in your head, your mind, to do the practice. So that's why, when people hear, oh my God, 6:30 every day, 6 days a week, that must be hard. But when you kind of get used to this lifestyle, like, I don't really notice the hardship that you mentioned in the beginning anymore.
Because for a beginner, of course,
Yeah.
it's quite a challenge.
For a beginner, committing to this entire regimen can be pretty tough, but also very rewarding. So you know it too.
Because, so I guess once you get used to the flow, getting up every morning practicing it, you start missing it once you don't do it. I mean, if you skip a day or something, then your body lacks.
Yeah, of course. Of course. That's all about the habits.
Yeah, sure. So what about the sequences? You mentioned there is a set sequence you have to do.
Yeah. So there's a number of different sequences. Just, like super easy exercise. If any of the listeners Google Ashtanga yoga series, probably the first two that will come up would be primary series. That is the series that's practiced most in the world, more than any other. There is intermediate series that's also pretty popular. Then there's advanced A, advanced B, and after advanced B, to be honest, I didn't encounter a person who would practice more than that. It's also something that we can kind of see in the books, all those crazy asanas. You basically just kind of start with Surya Namaskaras, and then you just don't touch the floor with your legs. You just stand on your hands the entire practice.
So I've
That's what it
heard there
is.
are two more actually, so six in total, but I'm not sure if this is
Yeah,
correct.
yeah. There's 6 in total.
Okay.
So fifth and sixth, I'm not entirely sure what is like the nickname for them, but advanced A and advanced B, say in Mysore, some people do practice those.
Okay.
So that's also humanly possible.
Okay. So better not
Um,
Google it because we'll get scared.
yeah, better not Google it, because why getting scared? No one is pushing you to do that. Because for beginners, basically, when beginners come to a class, they usually start with Surya Namaskaras, A and B. I mean, you as a Ashtanga teacher, you also know that, of course, because people need to build enough strength that is actually built very well in Surya Namaskaras than any other asanas from primary series, to then continue developing if they want. No, if they don't want, practicing just Surya Namaskaras, aka sun salutations, A and B, that's already good enough practice if you do it 6
Yeah,
days a week.
it can be a practice
That's
by itself. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, yeah. But speaking about asanas, so primary series adds at Zadabandhasana. So altogether, it's like 1.5 hours, around 1.5 hours. Intermediate is, I think, around, can be up to 2 hours. Again, that all depends on the your breath, how fast you breathe, and how much attention you pay to vinyasas, because that's also a very important kind of aspect of
Yeah.
Ashtanga practice. Vinyasa is a transition between asanas, and it is believed that in primary series, that is also one of the key things that helps you build enough muscle to then progress in your practice. So that's just, kind of decrypting all those terms that we're using
Yeah.
here
Yeah. Yeah.
for the
Sure.
future talk.
Okay. So in between each asana, there comes a vinyasa, and you already, as we said before, if you practice sun salutations beforehand, or like to build strength and everything, you already like gain the strength by practicing
Yeah.
sun salutations, and then just use it in your vinyasas, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Because no, there's so many ways actually of doing sun salutations. You can do a very relaxed way, which is kind of stepping and barely holding Chatvari, the Chaturanga, or you can be super slow and hold more Chaturangas and do jump backs, and do all of that, and then you sweat way more, and then it's a completely different effort also.
So it's really
And
very personal practice, which I personally also
yeah,
like
of
about
course.
Ashtanga. That's why I like it so much. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much creativity, so many things you can do with those primary series. And I personally think that, people who start, and not even start, also people who continue and at some point figure out that they don't need all of those crazy asanas from advanced series, can always come back to primary and kind of uncover how many interesting things there are inside. Because, well, I'm not even like, I wouldn't call myself a super duper practitioner. I've only practiced it for the 5th year now. But people who've been doing it for like over 20 years, they do primary and they still discover things in, moments to learn on. So it's a very rich practice that I personally never get tired of. So I hear a lot of people also doubting it, because, oh, but it's the same thing every day,
Yeah.
isn't it boring? Or, but I want to do like different styles. I want to do different asanas every day. Um, might be, but it's also, this is how you progress in something by practicing the same thing over and over. So that's a very interesting kind of repetition pattern in Ashtanga that, lets you learn.
It
So
lets you observe yourself and learn. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So, you came from India recently. Did you get used to cold and snow already?
Where I am right now in Ljubljana, there is not too much snow. There was just a little when I came back. I
Snow went
came
away,
back.
but it's very cold, I guess, comparison to India.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, in that relation, definitely. I am, well, mentally I am. I still didn't get ill, which is very interesting because usually I would get ill straight away after coming back from like a warm climate, back to European winter. This time it didn't happen, which is good. My body is still adjusting, because my practice now feels way more stiff. So my daily practice compared to the way it was in India for 2 months.
Yeah.
And of course that's due to the climate, but also that's because all the, like all the circumstances are different now, not just the weather. It's also the fact that I was practicing around so many people for 2 months in Mysore, and now I'm back to my lonely home practice. And sometimes I go to Nataraja too for lab classes, but mainly at home. So yeah.
So, you told me last time it was your second year in India. Why are you choosing this particular place to go to practice there? So what's going on there? Because I'm sure many people don't know.
Definitely. Yeah. Sorry, I jumped straight in.
No, it's no problem.
Straight into comparison, but yeah, of course, let me give some background. So um another big aspect of Ashtanga is the lineage of it. So it's a practice that is passed on from one generation to another. And it stems from Krishnamacharya, who maybe some of your listeners know about. Krishnamacharya was the teacher of Vikas Iyengar and Sri Pratap Jois. And then Vikas Iyengar, evolved into the Iyengar yoga method, and Sri Pratap Jois started developing the Ashtanga method. So my current teacher, like my current big teacher, is Sharath Jois, who is the grandson of Sri Pratap Jois. And he teaches in Mysore, India, which is considered the town and like the place where the practice of Ashtanga, the way we know it right now, originated from. And he now has his own yoga center, and people from all over the world who practice Ashtanga in kind of this classic, shall we say, way, they aim to come to him to, well, first thing first, at least experience what it's like, to be there where the tradition started. Because one thing that personally important is very important for me in yoga and in Ashtanga is to try and preserve the authenticity of it, just kind of as a nudge to the culture from where we borrowed it, right? So the yoga originated from ancient India, and in my vision, if I practice it, then what can be more exciting than going all the way, where it started? So that's one thing that's happening that's happening in Mysore. Second thing, obviously you practice with the person who's been doing that all his life, starting teenagehood, because Sharath was practicing under his grandfather's surveillance. And well, of course, there were like, ups and downs in his Ashtanga history as well, because after all, he's a human. So no one is kind of, putting him on the pedestal and thinking, oh, guru, sacred, etc. No, that's not about it. It's just about having a very kind of sustained and a very experienced, a very mindful teacher who follows you through the method. And then
sorry. Is he
go ahead.
approachable or is he more distant from the students?
Well, I would say he is approachable. The only thing that makes him slightly less approachable than an average teacher is that he has so many students. So there are different seasons. So every year he opens usually one season, sometimes two seasons, when people can come visit him and practice with him. And during one season, there can be around 500 people.
Wow.
So obviously he needs to build some sort of a distance from them, just to, because otherwise I'm not sure how that will work. In that sense, it makes him slightly less, available for kind of subjective personal questions and personal issues that you might want to discuss with him. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, studying under his surveillance, under his eye, is a very, very big honor for me. And, going through a primary series, and then what happens when you finish primary series with him, he also can bring you further into intermediate series, etc., etc., etc. So each season, when you start coming to Mysore and when you're back to Mysore, you get a few more asanas every season. And this is how you progress, and this is how your practice progresses.
Okay, nice. And do you do Mysore or do you do Let classes there?
There are usually 2 Let classes per week on Mondays and Saturdays. And Tuesday to Friday, it's Mysore style practice. On Mondays, we had primary series led and then intermediate series led. And then all of those 500 people, they are divided in batches. So the earliest batch starts at, don't be scared, 4 a.m.
Oh my God.
So those people wake up around like 2:30 to make it to their batch. Yeah, but that's kind of it. We even have a saying like 4 a.m. culture. There's a yoga clothing brand called 4 a.m. culture. I think
Oh,
the
really?
guys
I'm not familiar.
I think the guys are based in Brazil who are doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. So my batch this time was at 6:30. So I would wake up at 4, kind of do my coffee, do all my morning routine, then go all the way to the shala. Shala is the place where we all practice. It's a big space, a big hangar.
How many people approximately in the shala?
So during Lat class, everyone's all together. So it can be up to 500 people, pretty packed. So people are standing, one by one. So mats are very, very close to another. So when you do some Pujapidasana or something, when you need to kind of, hug yourself with your legs, usually you hit someone next to you. Well, I hit someone next to me. Some people are a little bit more careful, maybe. During Mysore practice, so per batch, there's around maybe 60 people, something like that, 60, 70 people.
That's still a lot, yeah.
That's still,
Comparison
that's
to
still a lot
our
of people.
standards here, yeah.
Of course, yeah. So, but that's, that's for our listeners who have never practiced Ashtanga or have never practiced any yoga, maybe also, that's the highlight of the Ashtanga community, every year when he announces the season. People who study with Sharath, for them it's something that you kind of look forward to the moment when you're back from it. And it's only been my second time there, and 4 months total I spent with him. But I already started feeling that, feeling the first thought when I landed home was kind of like, okay, how do I accumulate my finances to be able to, go back
Go
there?
back next year.
Yeah,
Perfect.
next year. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen in some of your stories you were posting on Instagram account that you started learning Sanskrit. Is it more
Yes.
difficult than Slovenian?
Oh, it's definitely more difficult than Slovenian, but interesting fact, it also has the dvojina.
Oh,
It has
wow.
the,
Really?
yeah,
Good.
yeah. They also conjugate the verbs for two people and then more than two
Wow.
people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a pretty well, I don't want to call it deep because it's still a very short course of language, but I was studying the entire time I was Sanskrit the entire time I was in India this year. And I started with the basics with level 1, which is just kind of writing and understanding the writing, because there's also a lot of scripting involved.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's difficult as a language, but it's also difficult as a writing, just as a as a scripture. um but that's super interesting for me, um because again I like I like going into kind of the Da Vinci mode and
Mm.
unpack the quests and solve the problems, and
Mhm.
being all Indiana Jonesy and studying that and studying the rules of that scripture and how how all of the letters come together to form words is
Mhm.
super exciting for me. And then so level 2, we started making sentences out of the words, and we started integrating more of the meaning, because the level 1 was just writing and pronunciation without any meaning. So second level was the meaning. And then the third level, we were able to kind of put together short stories
Mhm.
with very, very awkward nouns and verbs.
Okay.
Because the reason why people learn Sanskrit is to understand the mantras, because mantras and chanting is a big, big area of knowledge in yoga in general, but in Ashtanga, I don't want to say specifically because it's kind of applicable to any style in a way. But in Ashtanga, we do a lot of chanting. There is a mantra before we start practicing. There is a mantra after we start practicing. Well, it's the same mantra, just different parts of it. So it made the understanding of what we're actually chanting much more interesting and much more meaningful,
Yeah.
right? And way less scary too.
Yeah.
Because I just want to say, there are people who are afraid of coming to classes where people chant because, well, people might come from, all sorts of religions, and for them it might not be relatable and might not be ethical in a way, right? But when you understand what the chant is about, and it's basically just a blessing and kind of expressing your gratitude. So basically just saying thank you, but in the authentic way, that starts making way more sense, and puts all those scares away that you're
Mhm.
doing something
Yeah.
very like auspicious and weird.
Yeah.
So there's also
Yeah.
the aspect of that.
Yeah, yeah. I was planning to ask you about this in my next question, but it's good we opened the theme now because, yeah, I also think that altogether, like Sanskrit, understanding the mantras and also
Mm-hmm.
understanding the philosophy behind yoga, it really like gives people more understanding, because as you mentioned, and as I also see sometimes in my classes, people do get scared even if you only chant Om, for example.
Mm-hmm.
They already feel it's too religious or whatever. Yeah, maybe we should include this kind of let's say tutorials, or maybe we
Mm-hmm.
will start to introduce to students here as well these aspects to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, it just all comes from, I guess, people seeing yoga as a purely physical practice,
Mhm.
whereas it's really not, really, really not. If you read some philosophy yoga books, you will understand that that's such an ancient area of knowledge that contains so much more than just stretching, all sorts of different ways. And therefore, there should be something in the daily practice to also support that.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a little bit hard to explain because for me it's so obvious the value of preserving something traditional like that. Well, not everything traditional, but like this particular practice and this particular knowledge, keeping it um, at its core, like the way it's taught, where it's from, right? Of course, adapting it to modern life and to modern schedules, because we're not Indian people and we're not living in the same conditions, in the same climate. We're not eating the same food. We have completely different mentality. All of that is makes sense, but still it's so valuable to preserve something original, right?
Mm.
And mantras and the chanting, they keep us, they let us do this.
Mm.
In It's kind of a nudge. It's like a thank you, I borrowed your culture, it makes me feel so good, thank you, you
Yeah,
know
that's a really nice
so
explanation now you did.
mm.
Yeah, but I also guess it comes with time, because also when I started yoga, like my first year, it was only the stretching, and then
Mhm.
with years of practice, you start seeing other bits of this like huge
Oh yeah, of
thing
course.
that is
That's
yoga.
that's what you and me discussed a couple of days ago when we
Yeah,
met, is that um well, in order to kind of popularize this, right, and make it work for people, you need to give them something to strive for, some motivation.
yeah,
And the physical body, the asanas that look beautiful, extreme, I don't know, whatever else, they are the kind of the cue, the key, like the key attention for people to come, and get interested, get curious about, and at the end of the day, try it, attempt it.
sure.
But then, yeah, but when you start doing it somewhat regularly, not necessarily 5, 6 days a week, but like 3 times a week or something, then it all starts feeling way deeper on so many different levels. On the physical level, of course, because you feel your body's changing. On the mental level, so you feel kind of purified in your head, you feel lighter. Um, like I've struggled a lot with mental health issues, and it helped me a lot to regulate myself and to regulate, everything that I was dealing with without medication. And that was amazing for me because I never thought that I would be able to be, you know, the normal person. And then when you start feeling that, you think, oh, what is it doing to me? What is this stretching doing to me? And then you kind of start unpacking it bit by bit, and then it all comes together. And of course, it needs time and curiosity,
Yeah, sure.
uh,
Right.
and discipline too,
Yeah.
self-discipline.
Yes. Perfect. Thanks for this insight. I think I wanted to ask this question a bit later on, but I'll just do it now since we started developing the subject. So, my traditional question in this podcast is always, what is yoga for you? So, your definition of yoga. So, maybe you could just say something about it now.
It's, yeah, there should be a big differentiation between what it is for me versus what it is like per all the philosophy. I'll try to narrow it down. I guess for me it's an instrument. So yoga philosophy is an instrument for a more sustainable and conscious life in all the possible meanings. Whether that would be a more kind of considerate view of your body, and from kind of sustaining your body to sustaining the way you're dealing with the surroundings and people around you. And just it helps living, it helps being a good person, I guess, in the most conventional understanding of a good person we can think of. I would explain it like that.
Very nice. Thanks. Okay.
There's a very good quote. Well, I'm pretty sure it has like a bunch of iterations, that quote. I think it was by some of the very early Western Ashtanga practitioners that came to Mysore for the first time, either Chuck Miller or one of those. I will need to check that, fact checking. But the quote goes, yogi is a person who leaves the space behind them better than it was before they came. So basically, wherever you go, you just make something slightly better and improve something, and then just keep going.
Very
so yeah, so that's what it is for me. I can find it. It's probably somewhere in my phone, and can share it with you.
Okay, thanks. That's a very nice quote, yes. And it's true, yes. Okay, so going back to India and to your practice, now when you're back home, how does your day look like? So you wake up, you do yoga. How do you choose whether you do primary, intermediate? So how does it look like for you to be an Ashtanga practitioner?
So I do practice 5 or 6 days a week. So I try to stick to that traditional schedule. I don't have the luxury of practicing my 100% maximum best practice every day. But I'm striving, like I'm trying to do that every day. I wake up around 5:30, 6. I make my tea. I might read something, or I might play chess sometimes on my phone. That's what helps me prepare, for the practice too. So I have all those like little activities that also help me concentrate. So I try to fit all of them in the early morning, because for me it's the most kind of sattvic, the most comfortable time of the day for everything. So I do that. Then I start practicing around 6:30, sometimes 7, sometimes a little bit later. It also depends a lot on what I was doing the day before. If I'm too tired, I can start my day later. I do my practice usually. So after one day off, I start with primary. So I do full primary. Other days, so I do my usual practice up until the asana where I was stopped by my teacher, which is Nakrasana in the intermediate series. So I practice this kind of short intermediate. So it's still 5 asanas before the end of intermediate. So I don't do the full intermediate. If I feel tired, if I feel ill or sick, or something's wrong, or maybe something happened, something bad happened. I try to practice primary because it's way less mental effort. So primary is a lot about kind of a lot of vinyasas. It's a very dynamic meditation for me at this point. But intermediate is, so it's a series where every asana for me still requires quite a bit of effort. So when some asana doesn't necessarily end up the way I would want it to end up this particular day, I might repeat it a couple of times. I might, attempt it a couple of more times. And that's what makes intermediate harder, not even on the physical level, but just as an effort, as a mental effort. But sometimes, it happens so that I don't have the time to do everything. I might sacrifice a chunk of my practice for, say, more sleep, if I didn't sleep well or something like that. I might do half primary, which is Surya Namaskar, standing and sitting sequence until Navasana. So that can also happen. Sometimes it happens so that I don't have time at all and I do just standing. Sometimes when I feel really bad or I understand that I'm late for something or, things happen, it's life. I do Surya Namaskaras, like I said. Surya Namaskaras is a good practice. I did a post about it that I can also share. Kind of, for me, the gradual cutting of the practice, what it looks like. So what I do when I'm at my best and what I do at my worst. Because yeah, that again, it's an instrument and it's very nice to experiment with what feels good at particular days.
Okay, we'll check it out on your profile. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Great. What I also wanted to talk about and ask you is the fact that there is not a lot of Ashtanga going on in Slovenia. So, what would be your suggestion how to start for people who don't have access to like studios or teachers where you can practice it? So just Google it and start from scratch, or is there another advice from your side?
Yeah. So to start from scratch, if you've never done any yoga before or done just a little bit of it, I think the best source and the free source and the most accessible source is YouTube. Because there's a bunch of videos recorded by certified and authorized Ashtanga teachers for half primary, for example, or even full primary. So I would recommend starting with that. The absolute best person I would suggest to Google is a person named Laruga Glazer. We can also share some links to her videos later. She has a bunch of free resources, starting with a very basic 20-minute Ashtanga practice with just Surya Namaskars and some finishing asanas, up to, intermediate led. For example, when I feel like, okay, there will definitely be no intermediate led around me I can go to, I just put on her video and then I try to do it, to her pace. Practicing with video is really good.
Yeah, okay. So yes, you can send me the links and then I will put it under the video and like in the comments or in the description so the listeners can access to those. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
perfect.
sure.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely better to study with a teacher, but if you don't have one around, so you help around with videos
Of
and
course. Oh, absolutely. It's a massive privilege to have a teacher next to you, and it's a massive privilege to also have a shala with an everyday Ashtanga program. I've realized that when I actually moved to Ljubljana, because here we don't have a traditional Mysore program. Well, maybe we'll start one next year, but we'll see. Yeah, and I felt that. I felt complete isolation. You know, I didn't really know where to go because, well, there was Gordon's classes at Nataraya, but that was still only once a week, which for me was not kind of it was some support, but it was not enough for
Mm.
me in the schedule that I was used to after going to a shala every day. A shala, aka yoga studio, where people do Ashtanga, Mysore style. I got lost a little bit in my thoughts. What did I try to, what did I try
We
to?
were just, yeah, it's okay. I think you like wrapped it around. We were
Mm,
discussing how to study if you don't have a teacher
right,
around.
right.
And we said like the videos, the YouTube is a good
Mm-hmm.
resource. I would also add like my advice would be just to start slow and not try to overdo too much,
Oh
right?
yeah, of
That's like
course.
always, yeah.
That's not, yeah, don't get too ambitious. Don't get ambitious about asanas. They're just asanas.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter. The more you do them, the more you do them, the more you realize that it's just the shape. It's just what you see on the surface,
Yes,
the tip
yes,
of the iceberg. Yeah.
yes, sure. So another thing I wanted to ask you about is injuries in Ashtanga yoga. We discussed that last time we met in Ljubljana. But just for the listeners, because I met a
Mm-hmm.
couple of people who said, yeah, I was practicing but got injured. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe if people like Google Ashtanga, some of these resources might pop up. So have you experienced an injury from the practice itself? Or what is your opinion why this happens at all?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think I'm a very good example of what not to do because the way I evolve in my life, I do a bunch of mistakes and then I learn from them a lot. I'm a very not cautious person. I'm not a cautious person. So the way it happened to me, I was maybe in my second year of daily practice and I was extremely passionate about it and I was practicing every day at the shala. I was going to my first teacher back then. And I was very I mean, if we're using yoga terminology, I had a lot of rajas in me and it just was not balanced. I had too much energy and I was wasting that energy on my mat. I was wasting it to the point where I really wanted asanas to come out good, well, and good looking. I had a lot of ego in my practice, which is, again, it's okay. It's unavoidable. It's just like a phase that you need to go through, I think, with Ashtanga.
Yes.
And I ended up getting, so I think it's called, in English, it's called intercostal uh, nerve damage or something like that. So I had a lot of pain in between, like in my rib cage, in between my
Okay.
ribs.
Okay.
That would happen just all of a sudden during some asana where it was least expected. And it was just that was it. When it happened to me, I had to stop right there and just, stop doing everything.
So
And
the
then
whole
I would,
practice, stop the whole
yeah,
practice.
yes. And then I would recover for maybe like a few days or a week and go back to it very slowly, sometimes even taking painkillers.
Okay.
And well, that when I went to a doctor, they told me that that happens because of stress and that happens because of a lot of physical effort also. So my mistake was my mistake was going too fast and too hard on myself. But that just tains with my personality pretty well because I tend to be very perfectionist at what I do. Um, and I just wanted to, you know, exercise and I wanted my asanas to be the 120% of what I could do. And that was a
Mm-hmm.
mistake because
Yeah.
I wasn't looking at my body and the way and the signals it was showing to me. So that I consider that an injury. And I don't think that the problems of injuries is the practice. The problems of the injuries is the way you see the practice, and sometimes teachers also. Because when you are in the classroom, of course, there's the power dynamic, and as conscious as you can be about yourself and your practice and your body, you still are supposed to listen to a teacher because they're your teacher. And some teachers don't really see what's happening to you, and they can push you a little too hard for you at your current state, or too little, because I know that some students also they don't get enough attention, they don't get pushed enough at Mysore classes, and then they start trying things themselves that they're not ready for. And it all comes down to kind of having a very sober understanding of what you're doing and why, and having a supervisor that helps you on your path
and understands. Perfect. I think that was very, for me, and I hope also for the listeners, very interesting conversation. I hoped we managed to open up some curiosity and diminish the fears from Ashtanga yoga. I will slowly start wrapping up our conversation. Before we finish, I would like to ask you two last questions. And the first one would be, if we put aside Ashtanga now, or, I mean, of course, it's your practice, but can you name three things that yoga in general or your Ashtanga practice gave to you?
Yes, I can. I actually have them written down because that was one of those questions that I needed to have some notes for.
Cheat sheet.
So number one, I think I already mentioned, but it really did help me with my mental health. So I gained the somewhat mental health stability that I did not have before. I did not before Ashtanga. When I was doing yoga in the past like 8-10 years, I was still not in a good place at all. And Ashtanga was the practice that kind of, dragged me out of where I was. Then number two is community, close and deep friendships. Like right now, I'm thinking about, how many amazing people I've met on my Ashtanga path in Mysore, in number of different yoga shalas that I visited. And that's amazing. It's just, a very specific activity that bonds people very well because there's only this many people with whom you can talk about like what we're talking about now. And asanas and stuff like that. And number three, I think meaning also. Well, that sounds very vague, but what it means for me is, like I said, professionally, I'm a graphic designer and an art director, and I have 2 degrees in that. And I worked in a branding agency for 5 years up until this year. I quit a very hard, very difficult job that I had. And one of the main reasons why I quit it was I didn't see the impact. I didn't understand. Like maybe I was good at what I was doing, but I didn't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like what good does it bring beside, like, aside from things being beautiful because I would design them, okay. But what is the deeper impact of that, And then when I do Ashtanga and when I get a chance to teach some people Ashtanga, I can see the immediate impact it does to people, and I can see that this is actually a tool that can make people's life better, like health-wise, mental health-wise, in all those possible senses. So I guess it also brought some meaning to my life,
Yeah, perfect.
as you know, as dramatic as it can sound.
No, but very beautiful. Yeah, I would sign under the last
I'm
point.
happy. Do we have time? I'm actually very curious about you. Like, what are the 3 things it brought to you doing
We
it?
have time, but this podcast is not about me. We can
Maybe some
discuss
other time.
it sometime like later when we meet again in Ljubljana. No
Or maybe
problem.
I can do podcast with you that would still be your podcast, but I would be leading it
Aha,
and you
so
would
I'm
be
talking and you're asking
yes.
questions. We can do that as well. Yeah, sure. Okay. And my last question, yeah, advice for the listeners regarding anything, yoga or life in general, or whatever you wish to like put out to the world, to the listeners.
Sure. Well, number 1 is more kind of very, very open and again vague. I would say be curious and be consistent about what you're curious about. About what you're curious about. I guess that's kind of the recipe for life-changing experiences. You know, being open to something and then having the consistency to keep that going for you. At least in this context, in the Ashtanga context, it works very well, but I'm sure for me, it worked for some other things too. So I think that's a very important kind of thought to stick to. And number 2 is a little bit promotional, and I think it could be news for you too. So we're gonna be doing an Ashtanga yoga workshop at Nataraya. It's gonna be a 2 days workshop on the 20th and 21st of January. There's gonna be an official announcement on my social media, etc. So everyone who's interested in kind of starting Ashtanga or, you know, getting back into Ashtanga or enhancing Ashtanga or just, you know, gathering in a bunch of people with the same interests, are very welcome.
Good.
And it's gonna happen in Ljubljana, in Nataraya, end of January.
Okay.
More
So
info to come.
everyone save the date.
Save the date.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a perfect wrap up of this conversation. A little bit of hope for Ashtanga community in Slovenia. Great. Thank you so much for joining me, accepting my invitation. It was a very nice conversation. I enjoyed a lot. I mean, Ashtanga is like the top topic, which I can discuss for hours, but maybe we can stop now and like continue in person or maybe do another talk later on. So
Of
thanks
course,
again so much for
there's
coming.
so much to uncover, and thank you so much for inviting me, like finding me, inviting me, and having me. It was a pleasure, and sure, let's do it again sometime. And let's hope for the expansion of Ashtanga community in
Yes.
Slovenia.